Okay, welcome back to the return of FARMLETQUEST in 2025. It's been a long gap because the most important development to know immediately is that I am now totally dealing with this property on my own with no tenants whatsoever for the first time in over 3 years. That is longer than I've even been doing this series, so it is very significant to get into a breakdown of these issues with tenants. Issues with these vassals who fail to provide adequate tribute and instead challenge the authority of their liege lord, leading to treason, uprising, warfare and combat challenge sequences. Make no doubt those in rebellion of the law of God and the king will receive only one reply, and each in turn my enemies have been driven forth relentlessly from my lands. There will need to be some different episodes consequentially covering the situation, including getting into the management play of vassals who are switching from allied to enemy attack. But for this episode, given the significance of finally being able to feel I can roam freely over my own domains without challenge, without fear of me poking my camera all around and detailing the specific dynamics of military strategy in the area of large property management. Well, I just want to focus on this episode on continuity with what we've been discussing so far about the fruit and landscaping. It's clear in developing the concept of the game, I need to start actually drawing up the 2D and 3D maps I can then simulate into an environment, but otherwise, here in real life, I am presented with a big maintenance management issue immediately. But the miracle you see before you is this whole property, everything you're seeing has been mowed by me, and the only reason that is possible is because not only did we have a reasonable period of drought, there simply was not a serious all-day dump of rain until even at the start of April. The ground was still hard and dry, and a lot of all these lawns that along with all my plantings were going crazy with the nice regular rain dumps in spring. It just all came to a screeching halt after New Year's within just a week of there being no rain. And so usually what would be a bit of a challenge, given that the extremes of both seasons do tend to kill off some of my plants, I was able to smash huge amounts of weeds back with no recovery and totally ramp my carpet technique to achieve total, absolute dominance. At least I've used the opportunity to see that under some conditions, given that the southern point here is still pretty savage, basically with no one here, it can possibly be managed by myself. Though I am chained to this property doing basically a full-time job trying to keep it like this and really focusing on maxing all my maintenance strategies out, so there's still some energy left to build new stuff on top. There's still a possibility, as long as I'm not creating new maintenance tasks, rather just upgrading everything to be neater and require less maintenance, because I can't afford to dream of doing too much right now that is fancy or ambitious. So let's take a look around. I can't help but feel that there is a break here in the series because I can zoom out and talk more about everything at once. But that tells you how I'm adjusting, that I'm not aiming for much progress in specific areas, but rather full scope maintenance. So I started before Christmas back on another totally new offensive on the creek cleanup that has totally run out of steam again now. The clear answer must be using the carpet technique while I can until the rain will get it flowing again. But I have the whole property to deal with, and similarly the effort to take control of the inlet area and set up grapes on the fence line has totally failed, and yet one of the best and biggest plant outs of raspberries was the one that you saw me doing here in this moist corner. And the overall assessment of the entire wild berry enterprise is that it's been too dry for them to put on much growth, and that's an overall assessment of the orchard strategy altogether. They're juvenile trees and bushes are not going to fruit well. You've got to plan your process over years. You don't set up an orchard in 1 year, and that is probably why I never made the orcharding life a priority direction here until now, because we have more and more crazy amounts of grapes going here, and that underlines a really important distinction between the grapes and the strawberries as to the distribution of friction and effort in the whole process. Grapes are the top tier orchard product because most of the resources are committed early, and you wait and then you harvest year after year. While strawberries have the advantage that the plants themselves are easy to grow, it's just producing good fruit that requires regular efforts. But this means that if you can put in the grind, you can make progress quickly with strawberries that you can't with the grapes. Now with the weather switching, and this was not even the worst drought we've had, pretty much all those fruity twigs I stuck in the ground and looked so good at first they got fried, but I still managed to save this one apple tree here that's actually right here in the spot around the inlet where we have faced defeat, much in the manner of the Roman Empire. The turmoil and the challenges at the highest levels of total leadership cannot withstand defending the far extents of such a massive, sprawling realm. Much like the lands of the Scots or the Germanics in Roman times, the creek that, although is totally dry and will remain so into winter because it is so dry, well, it's totally wild, barbaric, unsubdued. But this is all with very good reason, for out of the chaos has arisen a new era of construction and great works that had lain unfinished in the series so far because I was devoting my personal efforts to the garden. I was scrimping up my gold, unwilling to spend money trying to fix things here and complete important construction projects because my vassals were not meeting the agreed tribute. Like the Russians throwing off the yoke of the Mongol Khans, they seek to evade and challenge the overlordship they are subject to as occupants of my tributary territories by right and privilege. Oh, but now we witness here a triumph, the construction of the stunning and glorious land port, also known as the Visitors Centre. While the tiling of the floor area remains incomplete, it is a symbol of victory and resilience. As before this Farmlet Quest series had ever been created, the destruction of the original construction was part of a series of bitter blows as my kingdom was overrun by wild savages, following my first cabin being totally blown apart in vicious storm conditions. Much of the unrest that has been drawn out since then has simply been basically residual bullshit from this era. That's why you see in the series me cleaning up a whole goddamn mess, because all these assholes turn up here and act treachery against their liege lord, and it defies the order of God and the king, and only by sword and fire will the error of their wicked ways fall upon their very own heads, and righteousness restored to triumph over this disorder and mayhem. So I call this thing a land port because it looks like a carport, but it is not for a car to go of or into there. So what the hell is it for? Well, you've got to imagine a van or a camper, and it's parked up here, and either that could be someone parked up to camp, or it could be loading or unloading upcycling materials and organic materials for our activities here. Basically, it follows a theme you might notice I keep, that many of these secondary spaces don't have a specific use, that it's simply upgrading the space in terms of shelter and construction so it has uses, because your activity there is not exposed to the wind, the rain or sun. A lot of y'all city folks may not have fully understood that wind and rain and sun is surely a mood, but gets real uncomfortable to be in for lengths of hours or even weeks. And so a lot of what I'm doing is enabling people to enjoy the outdoors and the natural nice surroundings, but they can maintain their comfort in doing so. And that's what these types of structures provide. That's really something about this place in New Zealand, is that winter and summer are only slightly unpleasant for about a month or so, and regulating the environment with these structures allows you to offset those extremes of the cycle that make it unpleasant, so you enjoy feeling the freedom to be active outdoors. That's why you want to live in a place like this, to have an enriching outdoor lifestyle. Lots of sunshine and clean air and food for your health. It's not really brain science. Now we also see the completion of great works such as the awning on the barn. And we've got this little grape walk area I've planted in, so see why I'm not worried. Our forces were defeated in the inlet because we did establish a nice raspberry patch in the corner, and we've got a mighty new grape set up right here, incorporating this brickwork structure that was actually built by the barbarian races during their occupation of this region in the past. Now this awning on the barn I am super chuffed with, because the land port is symbolically a gateway to the future, but the awning is a prow of this great vessel that is the barn right here, and it is sailing towards a future of prosperity. So we are going to need to follow up this episode with a greater overview of having things mapped out, and specifically talking about the outcome of being here on my own and caught between the two clear choices I've got to supply my income and get my bag up. Although I may have no allies and no income, on the other hand, I am holding a massive asset that is now making significant development progress, because even though it is a plodding pace on my own, I am steering my ship in the right direction without a bunch of assholes trying to get a grip on the helm and slow me down. Like, I have not given up everything I'm doing to put it all into this place. I will travel and vibe and make music with my friends again one day, but right now my task, my job, my path is I gotta kill all these weeds and grow some damn fruit. The strategic decision that I'm negotiating is in balancing fruit products, which is like almost having a full-time job for half the year, with having tiny home tenants for my cabins and such, which is almost certainly going to evolve into the next round of interpersonal conflicts over some territorial issue. But this episode is really just a bridge, so you can follow the continuation of the progress I'm making. And because it's been so dry, which did knock off a few of my more recently planted trees and all my fanciful propagations of the fruity fruit tree twigs, I've barely had to mow my lawn. So because I was a little intimidated by having to maintain the whole place, I had to seize the opportunity to just crank the carpet strategy up to a whole new level, doing at least a carload of carpet every week. That is just covering huge areas of this whole place with carpet in order to manage the mowing of it. And you can equivocate that with the defeat of our armies at the creek. That is when it comes to mowing huge spaces, the carpet gives me the strategy of a masterful field marshal commanding the attack. But I have not adapted these tactics for victory in the creek areas yet, but surely it will be so. The creek must be groomed to reveal the tranquil waters. It's funny because the weighting of my strategy was that in order to get better tenants, I have to improve the look of the place, and that is far more important than optimizing my fruit production. And so that's when you can make another comparative choice. That is between all the work I've been able to heave into this undeveloped part of the property by mowing, getting some of my heaviest tree deal steels from Bunnings set down here, and having my dad help me put a nice big deck right here on this cabin, and that is compared with basically the continuation of all the fruit propagation stuff I was ramping up this time last year heading out of summer, but the results were not that great. Water in summer is going to be placing a limit on how much I can do. However, having done some setups, had some fails with getting very little success fighting against the winter, now I am tuning it up nicely so that although my efforts are grabbing those easy gains on the wild side of the property, I'm now making more progress turning my lights and propagations to be much smarter. It's easy to grow strawberry plants. It is not easy to grow strawberry fruit, so you got to think smart. It is not so challenging to produce a lot of value by propagating plants such as citrus, rose and stone fruit by turning my lights over to more focused critical activity. But the effort and time required to turn a citrus or a rose or a stone fruit plant into the desired output of fruit and flowers is a part of a process that has to be managed. That is, it takes years understanding it all. I already have lots of yummy peaches, but they all fall on the ground and rot. I have just as many citrus trees, but I have no citrus fruit because it has taken years for them to grow. And yet, you won't have to deal with fruit on the ground with citrus trees because they stay on the tree. However, that brings us to another point to wrap it all up. Although all but one of my twigs died, every single one of my dozen nectarines are all still alive. Now a few of them are getting really nice growth, especially two here which I did not transplant into this position. What you've got is me just doing my permaculture thing. I know it must be in an earlier video. I was dumping seeds and fruit just straight into the soil, and here you have it a year later, two of my most vigorous nectarines. And like I said, I've started a dozen trees and they all look good. That's literally a truckload of nectarines every year in about 2 years from now, provided we've got the water. But the orchard life is in transcending strawberries and tomatoes with their yearly cycles into the full cycles of the nectarines, the citrus, the avocados also. And so as we seek the ascendance to the orchard quest here, it is all in accepting a comprehension of participating in the full process. And that is, there are very solid reasons why I still need some people paying some rent around here. I need the money to pay for more constructions. I need my peasants to be producing gold so that I can pay for builders and plumbers to make valuable enhancements to grow my village and produce more fruit that I can sell. So, having added to various threads developing through the series here, now I can hopefully have another episode soon, getting a lot more oversight, both spatially of how things are laid out, and basically analysing this question of value, of the value cycle. How are you building value to build more value, to build more value, to break through the farmlet quest and ascend to the challenge to become the master